Welcome to Afterthoughts, everybody. This is our recommend or refute episode where we're going to go around the table and each talk about something that we watched separately this week and pitch it to the group or tell everybody else, hey, maybe don't watch this. With me, as always, our regular crew, John Garcia. What's up, John?
Hey, I am feeling perfectly fine. Good baseline. Schlocktober is not ruined me yet. I feel like I need one of those Blade Runner tests where I'm like within cells interlinked to just like know when I've crossed the threshold, but I'm not entirely sure.
John, have you considered that you might just already be broken and it's not possible for Schlocktober to destroy your psyche any more than it already is?
I did watch Lawnmower Man 2 today, and I thought it was okay.
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm wondering if he takes that test and it's more like the, why are you asking that? There's a turtle in the desert, flip it over.
Why am I not helping
what do you mean?
Why isn't the turtle watching Schlock?
And Ryan King, how's it going?
Yeah, pretty good. All right, my sanity's there, but we're not watching the same schlock. We're just over here. We're just watching bad kid movies.
That's standard practice for the King household.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, John, what piece of shit did you watch this week?
Well, I watched a movie that I think it's one of my new favorites. Honestly, just it's so special. I'm one of 4 people to review it on Letterboxd. It's a real privilege, I gotta say. It's 1993's Rage of Vengeance.
Here, in a world of violence, an ex-cop tries to forget his past.
I just want it over.
But an ex-con never forgot him.
You and I must face each other.
One is running the streets.
I'm taking what is mine.
The other could lose everything he loves.
I'm gonna kill him.
Now, 2 worlds collide, and only one will survive.
How many people do you think have seen this movie? If 4 people have ever rated it on Letterboxd, I know it came out in 1993, well in advance of when Letterboxd existed, but how many people do you think, over under 1,000 people, have watched this movie?
I'm gonna say over 1,000, just because, you know, with the VHS revolution and democratization of video and movies.
Did this get a theatrical release?
No, there's no way.
Definitely not.
There's no way
way
this got a theatrical release. Based on, like,
I would
what it
assume
looks
everyone, or maybe 80% of the crew has watched it. Maybe not all of them. Maybe there's some Michael Caine aspect there of people who did not watch the movie they were in.
The fact that the Letterboxd doesn't even have a synopsis says everything that there is to say about this. Rage of Vengeance, 1993, is directed by Serge Radnonsky. It's also written by Serge.
That title feels redundant. Rage of Vengeance.
Rage of Vengeance.
It really does,
Yeah.
right? So a little fun trivia fact for you. Serge is apparently a well-known ballet instructor who also starred in the Broadway production of Cats. And
Oh my God.
this is all the trivia that I read about.
It's a horrible confluence of events.
Maybe I'm pronouncing Serge wrong. It might be Sergei. Sorry, Sergei Radnonsky.
I like Serge.
I'm going to go with Serge. Apologies, Serge or Sergei, if that's your name.
There's no I in it. It's spelled like Serge.
Yeah. So I guess at some point he decided that he wanted to make a movie, and the movie needed to be about the themes of revenge. And we just talked about Mandy.
Mhm.
You know, it all fits together for me in my brain. But that might be because my brain's rotted. And this whole movie is about a cop whose name is just Frank. There's no last names in this movie except for somebody who plays Tony Wu. I don't know if the Wu is the last name, but hey, why not? And
Tony
Frank,
Wu!
Yeah, Frank is an undercover cop or a regular cover cop. I don't fucking know.
Overcover cop.
He's an overcover. He's a trench coat overcover cop who goes, who kills like the lover of a mob boss. And the mob boss decides that he needs to get revenge on Frank. And there's this whole kind of, it's a story that we've all heard a lot of times where it's like, hey, I'm the rival to this mobster. I'm the only cop who could take him down. But there's also another pair of cops who are trying to take him down and everything like that. Why
does he murder the love interest of this mobster?
He's trying to bust this mobster, but also, as a cop, he's trying to act as the judge, jury, and executioner, which is
as most cops do.
Yeah. So
and the law.
He just like unloads a full clip of rounds into this dude's girlfriend or lover, whatever, and that guy. The movie opens with that, and the guy's like, "No!" and screaming about it. And Frank's kind of haunted by it. He doesn't really give a shit. He's more haunted by the fact that he missed and he did not arrest the mobster.
It's the missed shots that really keep me up at night.
Yeah. Damn, all those dead kids. That's not what bothers me.
It's the kids I didn't kill.
Yes. Maybe the real friends we made were the kids we killed along the way. So he like the entire movie is this back and forth, them trying to like chase each other and everything. I don't really care too much about the story because it's really about the vibe.
Mandy.
Yeah. And if you've listened to me talk about bad movies before and things that I really love about these kinds of movies, full disclosure, I am the only person who's rated this movie 2 out of 5 stars. The other person has rated it like a 3.5, or other 2 people have rated it 3.5, and one person's rated it 5 stars. So,
was that the director? Was that Serge?
Yeah, it's probably Serge.
Yeah.
But I love it all the same because it's punching above its weight. It's really trying to go for something, and it clearly doesn't have the budget to do it. And I'll give you an example of something that definitely tells you that. Characters, when they get shot, they don't have squibs. And so they just convulse on screen to the sound of bullets. And it looks like they're being possessed by sound effects.
That sounds right.
That's fairly common for low budget movies.
It's
yeah. It's the platoon effect.
Yes. But other times, like, they use like clearly black paintballs to shoot like a person or two. All of the actors in it are overacting. They're like really swinging for the fences and giving an Academy Award performance in every scene. And it just channels that kind of like, oh, you really tried. And I can tell that you tried. And I can feel the energy you're trying to put behind it, but it's just not landing. There are also sequences in which editing wise, they did not know how to make it look more realistic, that people got shot or somebody was hit by a car, say. And so they'll just hard cut to an establishing shot and then immediately cut right back to the exact same scene and just show somebody. So like a dude gets
like
hit
a before and after kind of.
So like, imagine if you will, somebody's walking on the street and they get hit by a car. Okay. The car drives up going full speed. And then you just get a hard cut to like, the place that they're at. It's like a power plant. And then a hard cut right back to them being like, hey, what the fuck? They're like on the hood of the car. Like, why'd you try to hit me? Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
You don't see the actual impact. You see the before the impact and the after the impact.
The choreography also, there's some choreography that's kind of decent where they were kicking each other and that kind of stuff, and somebody will fall back into a piece of glass, but you get that exact same establishing shot cut, and then it cuts back to a glass piece being pulled out of their body.
That's like the worst kind of editing I could ever possibly imagine for that kind of sequence. Like there are ways, like, why don't you just cut to the dude's face who's being hit by the car and then cut to the after, right? There are so many ways you could do that where it could feel more cohesive than just like a wide shot of the area generally.
Yes.
John loves these movies where they have no fundamental understanding of how a movie works.
It's so charming to me because, I mean, the director and writer, obviously being of a theatrical background, seems to have some understanding that you need to somehow show that there's a kinetic action happening, but there's no footage shot to reflect it. And I was just more enamored with that. There's also a love scene that happens that I was really surprised has like full exposed breasts in it, because I thought surely no actor would expose herself to this movie, would last that long being in a position that looks this sexual or whatever.
They didn't cut to an establishing shot instead.
They didn't cut to any establishing shots or anything. They just full on show kind of a sensual sex scene happening that's just still awkwardly done. And I was more impressed with the actors committing fully on that kind of budget to this sort of thing. It to me, it felt like this place in between champagne and bullets and like Breathing Fire or those kind of movies that are lower budget early 90s. It felt like a passion project where they're just like Surge was really trying to meditate on how far revenge will drive you, because the main character and any ancillary characters who try to come in contact with this mob boss, they end up having somebody close to them get killed for just trying to pursue vengeance. And it's like, cool, I see that you're thematically trying to pursue that, but the way that you're doing it is totally wrong. And there's so many things that I could see wrong about it that could be just a little better. You could tweak it this way or that way. And for like a filmmaker in particular, I think it's just fun to watch. So for me, I was like, oh, I exactly know what you were trying to do at every step of the way in this. And I just had a fun time like watching it. I was like, you can see where the direction went wrong, where some of the lines that were fed could have been a little bit better, that kind of stuff. And it's fun to pick apart. But yeah, I really dug it.
Interesting.
It's again, like approaching like a recommend or refute stance. I want to recommend it for like film lovers just because it's fun to pick apart. I think with friends, especially, it would be a good watch. But on my own, I could see it like if you're just not as familiar with this kind of territory, it's not going to be fun. It's going to feel more painful than it is fun for you. But again, I found something new I want to share with friends. It's
interesting. Given that 4 people have rated this on Letterboxd, how did you find this? Where can you watch it?
This is on Tubi.
Tubi.
Our classic standard Tubi. Everybody, the mark of quality Tubi, where you can watch all great
85-minute movie and 26 minutes of ads.
Yeah, exactly. From Rage of Vengeance to the classic Amityville in space, Tubi has everything you're looking for. This podcast not sponsored by Tubi.
How does I wonder what Tubi's like profit sharing model is. The fact that you can just be like that anything you could put on there. I
bet Tubi takes like 98 cents out of every dollar that is spent on that platform.
I would say another way to phrase this movie or like frame it, if you're familiar, is this is like the film that Godfrey Ho didn't release is kind of how I felt about it.
Oh, okay. Was there a Garfield phone?
There was not a Garfield phone. I wish there had
Oh
been. Yeah, really, really disappointing.
What was the one that we watched during Schlocktober last year?
That is Ninja Terminator.
Ninja Terminator, yes. And I realized I had already seen it because How Did This Get Made did an episode about it. And I had watched it for that. Yep.
It's, Godfrey Ho, magical filmmaker.
Incredible.
So yeah, that's my recommend this time around. Rage of Vengeance, for all you schlock jockeys out there. Check it out. Let's get some
all
more
of you schlock jockeys out there. There's so many of you out there listening to this podcast right now.
Let's get some more reviews on Letterboxd, shall we?
Maybe we can get this bumped to 5 or even 6 reviews.
Hell, if we do enough, maybe we can get a fucking synopsis on Letterboxd.
Hey.
Who knows? Some
like
dreams
that.
come true.
On IMDb, 33 people have rated it, but no one was bothered to write anything about it.
Yeah.
Man.
And I do like thinking about the fact that somewhere Surge is just sitting there and a check from Tubi showed up for like 9 cents.
Mm-hmm. Oh, less than that.
It's like, somebody watched it.
I want to find him and have a conversation. I would love to interview Surge, know what was going on.
Surge, we know you're listening. Surge, if you're listening.
Vinegar Syndrome, if you're listening.
We'd love to interview you. We'd love Hillary's emails and to interview you.
Oh my God. But yeah, there you go, everybody. Rage of Vengeance.
Rage of Vengeance. I am
1993.
not going to remember that title in about 30 seconds. Ryan, what did you watch this week?
Yeah, I'll give a quick shout out before I go more into what I did watch.
Every time, Ryan.
You trying to
gotta
break
do
the
two
rules, boy?
movies every time.
We have to talk about whatever I watch with my family, and if it's not good enough, talk about an
He says
actual
that like
movie
he's
I
holding us
watched.
hostage.
Yes. I talked about Haunted Mansion previously, and when I looked at reviews for it, it was mixed between people who were like, "Yeah, this was all right," and people who were like, "God, it's so much worse than the earlier The Haunted Mansion with Eddie Murphy." That I never watched because I had only heard that thing was fucking horrible.
Yeah.
So
if
we
Lakeith
went-
Stanfield is in something, I'm guessing it's better than the
has to be
version
better
with Eddie
than-
Murphy.
Yeah,
Yes.
it has to be better.
Eddie Murphy, he can be good and stuff, but he can also just be very abrasive and annoying and
You
stuff.
hear that, folks? Lakeith Stanfield and the Nutty Professor.
Oh,
Make it happen.
dear
Yeah. Oh,
God.
all right. I'd watch it.
Oh.
Well, I'd watch it.
I don't
Um,
know that I would. That would be just a sad day to see Lakeith Stanfield debasing himself like that. That would be rough.
Successfully
think
made
it's-
Dixon depressed.
yeah, it really hurt.
It's
That
not
stung.
hard.
I think it says something that Eddie Murphy paused for 4 years after The Haunted Mansion before he made another movie as a star, and that was Norbit, and then he paused again for a while.
Oh, he
So
did
this
another
is
I'm
definitely-
Every Character movie. Yeah,
Yeah,
those
this is
never go
definitely
wrong.
prime death of Eddie Murphy time. So yeah, The Haunted Mansion, I watched it with my family and it was terrible. And I actually asked their opinions and all three were like, yeah, the other one was way better. It Yeah, I was just like, this is exactly the thing that is the shit that just gets crapped out to VHS historically. It's sad to me that The Haunted Mansion like went to theaters. Haunted Mansion did, but it was like in and out really quick. It was honestly just like right onto Disney
Yeah, it
Plus.
was
Like that was their
fast.
target. Yeah, where it was much more deserving of a theater release than The Haunted Mansion. It's not funny. This is definitely like Eddie Murphy doesn't really have a chance to be funny. It honestly doesn't make much sense. Like there was just no drive between like why anything was happening. Why are the ghosts there? Why do they have powers? Like all of that not really explored. My brain was just going off the whole time. So yeah, it was bullshit. Those people that thought that the new one was worse had nostalgia glasses. They were 4 when they
Oh.
thought it, and they remember it when they saw it, and they remember it being decent, and it is not.
How do you have nostalgia glasses for early 2000s Eddie Murphy? That's just a weird place to be.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be 20 something now, you know? Like, well, I guess this was like, yeah, right? Like, you would be
Yeah.
like 20 now. So maybe you
If
were just
saw
a
it when you were
baby.
kid. Yeah.
Yeah, this is like the 3rd movie you ever saw, and
Right,
you thought it was
yeah,
decent,
uh-huh.
and you only know Eddie Murphy as the voice of Donkey and Shrek,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you thought this was great. So the real movie that I watched, moving on to that, I watched 2007's Trick or Treat.
This is the one night.
Don't forget your costume.
All sorts of things. Roam free.
The Halloween School Bus Massacre.
Be quiet.
Why?
You'll bother the neighbors.
Okay.
It is just the letter R in the middle there. I guess that makes
We don't
it
have time
easier
for
to
the
copyright.
O. It's just
Yeah,
trick
yeah.
or
Trick
treat.
or treat.
It's just
I going through like the horror movie franchises, like all those kind of things that I've been trying to pick and going back and looking at the character from Trick or Treat, Sam, which I don't actually think he gets a name per se in this movie, shows up like in the Halloween stores. Like every time I'm in there, there's little statues and t-shirts and shit. And I'm always like, the fuck is that character? And like, why is it there? And it's like right below the zeitgeist. It's right in that cult level, but enough to sell in a Halloween store, but not enough for like regular people to recognize, I don't think. So I was like, all right, I want to dig in. I want to watch this. I want to see what it is. It is an anthology. It follows 5 stories, question mark. It was a little hard to tell
that's a lot of
exactly.
stories for a movie to.
Yeah, damn
to
it.
Yeah,
Pack 'em in.
One of them is like super short though. It's really 4 that have anything, and it kind of through some of it cuts back and forth a little bit from some of them, so you don't necessarily like follow one straight through. Honestly, weirdly, like saying that, it works though. They all get tied together in like a very nice bow at the end, and I'm sure on a rewatch, this movie gets a lot better. Once you kind of like know all the storylines and all the interconnected pieces, like watching it through probably makes it more fun, because I did go back and the final scene and the first scene are the same scene but from different perspectives. And I went back and saw the first one and was like, oh, all this stuff was happening in the background. Like I can see it the way that it was shot. They're like, oh, across the street, this other stuff is happening. And I know now what that is. And I just sort of saw it in the background before. So I think that's cool. Like that's a good effort to kind of actually make everything fit together that way. It isn't like every one of these is like a solid, like actual scary horror or anything. It's pretty schlocky, John. Not
Nice.
the type you watch, but the regular level of schlock.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of hokey schlocky, but honestly, I was talking to Darlo about it today. I know all Halloween movies are, honestly. I think other than like John
The
Carpenter's
one.
first
Yep.
Halloween,
Mhm.
I think everything else is a little bit shitty and it knows it, and we're just having fun with it. Um, and so I kind of think it hit that bar where it's like, yeah, it's fine. Like it's fun. You're kind of having fun with the stupidity. It reminded me a bit of like Tales from the Crypt or EC Comics, where it kind of like inverts each story, has a little inversion in it. And there's like a thematic element to all of them of like following the rules of Halloween. Vaguely, the rules are like kind of ish established. But like respecting Halloween, and if you don't, like you get killed, is kind of I guess, the basis of each of these stories. Usually in a ridiculous way, you get killed.
If you like don't believe in ghosts, then you get killed, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like one person, like the very first thing a person comes back and they're just like they don't enjoy Halloween. And by the way, my like Ryan radar went off immediately, but I ended up being okay with it.
Patent
the very
pending.
opening scene, this couple is coming back from I guess a Halloween party or being out or whatever, and she's like, "All right, Halloween's over. I hate it. Whatever. We did your thing." And she's goes and puts out the pumpkin light that's at like the front of the house. And her boyfriend's like, "Oh, you're not supposed to do that. Like, you're supposed to just leave it on." And she's like, "Yeah, I don't. What's gonna come get me? Like, fuck, it's Halloween. It's it's
The
not like
pumpkin protects you from the evil spirits.
yeah, exactly." She then immediately wants to take down the Halloween decorations. I'm talking fucking 11 p.m. at night on October 31st. She's like,
You
"Time
gotta
to take
respect
everything out of the
it.
yard.
Yeah.
Like, we're done."
I like it.
And I was like, "That's
rid of
insane."
it.
I'm like, "That's fucking insane." But then she gets killed for it. So I'm like, okay, that's okay. And then coming back to it, like after all the other things, I'm like, yeah, she gets killed specifically because that's bullshit to try to take down stuff on Halloween night. Like that's exactly why. So I'm like, all right, I came back around to like, it makes sense with like the theme. It doesn't make sense why she would think to take it down right then, but it makes sense with the theme. Um, Again, kind of like you give up. It tells you at the beginning, like, hey, give up a bit. Like, let's just give in to the insanity. This is just a slasher movie. So yeah, I recommend it. It's kind of just like a a fun Halloween movie to add to your list. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It Each story is on like there are other horror anthologies where one of them is like weak, like really weak, when you go back and like the Tales to the Crypt movie or any of those kind of previous ones, there's always at least one story that you're like, wow, that one's really bad. These are all honestly pretty on par with each other. It's not like they're all A's, none of them are, but it's like nice to see like they're all solid like B minuses all throughout. So it's at least leveled.
Okay, so it's aggressively average, is what you're saying.
Well, he said a little
Yeah.
above average. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like just slightly,
Uh-huh.
just slightly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if it was like each one was independent and they didn't really tie in to each other well, and there wasn't a thematic sharing or anything, then it would be kind of like, all right, whatever, you put together something. But like as a movie, it has that elevation I talked about with a horror, where this combination of all these stories and things kind of happening in the background that are related to the other ones, and how you kind of learn a little bit more about the characters as things go on. And there's this central Sam character that's kind of in the background. It comes around to creating something that's like slightly elevated, that gives it something that sets it apart from just like, we killed people. We had fun.
Yeah. I know the director, Michael Dougherty, also directed Krampus, which is one of my favorite.
Oh, I saw
horror films.
Krampus with
is-
Adam Scott.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
It's a really fun horror comedy movie.
Yeah, he and Bryan Singer are part of this, and they've made every bad superhero thing, so it's a little.
Oh.
Does he direct all of the short films within it? All the segments?
Yeah, it's like all one thing.
Okay.
Yeah, even though they're like independent stories, so to speak, in kind of an anthology, it actually all is one thing. They're
Okay.
not necessarily like one story flows to the next, but it shares some characters and kind of wraps it all together in the end. So yeah, it's like they're all kind of the same piece, so they should be all directed the same. So there's no like real different feel to any of them, like you would like with Tales from the Crypt or something like that. Each one is drastically different and drastically directed differently. This one is like, no, they're all in the same world, the same night, the same kind of people.
Nice.
How I'm just curious in general, temperature check for the room. How do y'all feel generally about anthology series? Like, you into it? You not into it? You indifferent?
Typically, like, I haven't seen a lot of them. The ones that I have seen, I haven't been super into. There's a movie that I've been wanting to watch forever that I haven't gotten to called New York Stories. That is a New York anthology film where 3 segments directed by Scorsese, Woody Allen, and Francis Ford Coppola. And I was like, that sounds really cool. I want to watch that, but I haven't seen it. But I haven't like the of the anthology films that I've seen, I've always felt like, okay, these are short films that are kind of connected, but not really. And it just feels like more of a shorts program than it does a cohesive movie. I think mostly in my experience.
Yeah, anthologies are just tough in general. Like even anthologies as a TV show or anthologies from like season to season, like True Detective.
Mm-hmm.
Again,
Yeah.
there's always like a weak one, and then it kind of just throws
Yeah, I
everything
watched
off.
season 1 and season 3 of True Detective, and that's it. And I probably won't watch any more of it. And I
Yeah, you're
like
probably good.
both
Yeah.
of those, but like don't feel like I need to watch any more of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of the same thing with anthology movies. There are some I like from like a cult level, like Slacker is an anthology. You kind of just like
Oh,
weave in and out
Does that
of
count?
people's stories.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's
Sort of like you kind of just like move from story to story, and
Yeah.
they're actually like less interconnected.
I feel like Slacker is so much its own thing that I would like. I feel like typically an
Kinda.
anthology thing is like there are discrete stories, and Slacker there's not. You're just like you are the camera moving through the city, experiencing
flowing,
different things,
yeah.
and there's like little 2-minute bits that string together.
22
in a weird
short
way.
films in Springfield.
Exactly.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually that's a good example.
Aurora Borealis.
Aurora Borealis. At this time of year, at this time of day, in this part of the country, localized entirely within your kitchen.
Yes.
May I see it?
No.
I also like 4 Rooms, like it's completely stupid, but like that kind of like it. I almost feel like the ones I like are that like cult-ish level. But yeah, I'm like Amazing Stories in the Twilight Zone movie and Tales from the Crypt. Like there's always a weak one. There's always it kind of just they don't necessarily flow with each other.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the TV shows. Like there are episodes of Tales from the Crypt or Outer Limits that are like fucking amazing.
Yep.
And then there's a lot that are not.
Even like a
Eh.
Treehouse of Horror Simpsons episode, like even some of the better ones, there's always weak points, right? And like a lot of times I don't like Treehouse of Horror episodes, but there's occasionally like one of my favorite Simpsons episodes ever is like the shinning and the time traveling toaster, but then there's the like eating the children in the cafeteria, and that one is fine.
Yeah.
It's like a run of the mill average Treehouse of Horror segment, but it feels like it is bringing you down from like these 2 segments that are 2 of the best things the Simpsons have ever done, and then you have the eating the children in the cafeteria one, and you're like, oh.
Or like the Ghoul
All
Bus,
right.
which is just the terror at 10,000 feet or whatever, but on
Yeah.
a school bus kind of thing. It's like,
repeated.
all right,
Or
fine.
the way they did an early one where they just do the Raven just straight
Yeah.
up.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like,
Straight up the Raven.
okay.
Yeah.
And the Raven is Bart for some reason. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't even like if you were like put a gun in my head and I'm like, what's the best anthology movie? I'm like, I wouldn't even, I don't even know if it's Trick or Treat. I have no idea. Like
I don't know. I
can't
need to watch New York
necessarily think of
Stories,
one.
and I will report back on it. But
Yeah. Let us
Yeah.
know.
cool. All right. So you are recommending Trick or Treat.
Yeah, I do recommend it. It's interesting to me that it has kind of a cult following. It kind of works, but there's not like 9 more of them like there usually would be. I guess it just
Yeah.
didn't make the right amount of money.
It's probably hard to make additional anthology movies, I would guess. Like it's probably hard to turn that into a franchise.
Yeah. That's an even more of a stretch.
Yeah. And unless they just decide, oh, we're going to take this character and we're just going to make a cohesive 90-minute movie about him and just make that into a franchise.
Really
But-
seems like now with
100% the-
streaming that you would be able to get away with that.
Yeah.
Like, the anthology.
100% the wrong
Yeah.
thing to do though. This
Yeah.
is that's exactly like don't go back and give them a backstory. That's
Yeah.
exactly the wrong thing to do. I don't need that.
All right, so I watched a classic horror movie this week. I was hanging out with my girlfriend this week and trying to figure out something to watch. She's not into scary movies, and I was like, "Come on, like it's October. Can you watch like one scary movie with me?" And I suggested some like horror movies that aren't that viscerally terrifying, and she was like, "I think I could probably handle Hitchcock." So we watched Psycho this past week.
Here we have a quiet little motel, tucked away off the main highway, perfectly harmless looking, when in fact it has now become known as the scene of the crime. Well, the murderer, you see, crept in here very slowly. Of course, the shower was on, there was no sound, and well, it's too horrible to describe.
I had seen Psycho before. I had not seen the 4K restoration yet, and I had the Hitchcock 4K collection that has Rear Window, Psycho, Vertigo, and The Birds. And I hadn't seen any of them yet in that format. I've seen all those movies, but hadn't seen them on 4K.
You don't
so I
want
was
to
interested
see
to watch it.
Face smashing of Vertigo in 4K.
I've heard the restoration of Vertigo is incredible. I do want to check it out, but yeah, I'm sure not every scene would look great in that.
Hot Jimmy Stewart action.
Oh yeah, baby. But the Psycho 4K restoration was incredible. They pitched it as the thing where like, oh, it's this uncut version that nobody has seen since 1960 when it released in theaters, and every home video version has been this like handicapped studio version that is not showing you the actual real thing. And I was like, oh, okay, this could be interesting to see some sort of new cut that hasn't been seen for 60 plus years. I didn't notice a single fucking difference. I've seen Psycho several times before. I didn't pick up on any differences in this new cut, so that was a little disappointing. But the 4K restoration does look really great, so that was fun to see. Yeah, I mean, Psycho, if you haven't seen Psycho, what are you doing? It's basically the story of an executive assistant played by Janet Leigh who is having an affair with a married man, and they want to kind of go have a life for themselves, and he's looking to divorce his wife, but if he does that, he'll be poor and paying alimony, and he won't be able to provide for Janet Leigh, and so they're kind of stuck in this situation. She lives in Southern California, and she lives in Phoenix, and he lives in California somewhere, and so they're kind of trying to figure this out. They're going back and forth to see each other, and one afternoon, a rich dude walks into her office and decides to buy a house with $40,000 cash, and her boss says, "Hey, take this $40,000 cash to the bank," and she decides to pocket that cash and drive to her boyfriend and say, "Hey, I got some money. You can divorce your wife now, and we can live happily ever after." On the drive there, she has to stop at the Bates Motel, run by Norman Bates, played wonderfully by Anthony Perkins, and things go terribly wrong from there. Yeah, I mean, Psycho is just a wonderful classic horror thriller movie. Hitchcock, I have a kind of mixed feelings on Hitchcock. I think he is technically just one of the most adept filmmakers of his era, just doing things with the camera that just nobody had really thought of doing before. He kind of doesn't give a shit about his characters, and that can become a problem in his movies. Like, we've talked about Vertigo before. With Psycho, I think it's less of a problem because Anthony Perkins is just so good as Norman Bates that it doesn't really matter that Hitchcock doesn't care about the characters because he's just bringing so much to that role. Psycho is there's a lot of famous scenes in Psycho. One of the most famous things about it is that you're following this one character and you're thinking this movie is about this thing, about stealing money and trying to get away with it and doing all this thing. And then all of a sudden she is murdered and you're like, oh shit, where do we go from here? And you have no main character. And as an audience, you're completely unmoored and confused about what's going on and how to understand what you're seeing going forward. this is the second week in a row that I am recommending a movie that has Martin Balsam in a supporting role and an incredible score by Bernard Herrmann. So that's pretty cool with both of these. Last week with Cape Fear from 1962 and this week with Psycho. But yeah, I mean, Psycho is a really fun ride. It's like scary, but it's very digestible. It's not viscerally terrifying. Like I would say that Mandy is way scarier than Psycho, but you might not actually classify Mandy as a horror movie, where like you kind of have to classify Psycho as a horror movie. Even though Hitchcock is known more for doing thrillers and stuff, this feels like kind of beyond the point where you can say it's not a horror movie. But yeah, I mean Psycho is great. It's just there's so many really innovative things in its camera work and kind of creating the slasher genre and all of these things. There's so many horror movies that came afterward about like dudes with weird sexual hang-ups about like dressing as women and killing women and all these things that having personality disorders that had never really been done in films at the time that have become just consistent tropes in horror films and psychological thrillers and whatever you want to call them. As we've gone from 1960 to today, the Bernard Herrmann score is fucking great, and there's so many shots that are so iconic. Like obviously, there's the shower scene that everybody knows, and there's the Herrmann score going and all that's great. But there's also so many scenes that are just so well done, like Vera Miles stumbling across the corpse of the mother and like the light bulb swinging back and forth that just has this really great effect on the shot. Just beautiful black and white cinematography that I think it wouldn't have the visceral effect that it does if it were shot in color. But the black and white with the contrast of the light and the way the camera moves just works really well. So, yeah, I mean, Psycho is good. Newsflash. You should check it out. I assume both of you have seen Psycho several times.
Oh yeah, and I've also known that shots in Psycho are referenced in like film books, film classes.
Mm-hmm.
They're all like kind of referenced as these psychological techniques that are used, like the conversation between, Bates and sorry, totally blanking on it right now.
Janet Leigh.
Yeah, between Bates and Janet Leigh, the angles of those shots and like conveyance of power or just some kind of off kilter atmosphere to it. That is something that is always like I remember from any kind of like film book that I've read where they just reference Psycho and how that puts something in your mind as an audience, which at times is true and at other times no. It can just be a choice that you make. It depends. So yeah, I remember seeing Psycho and being pretty freaked out by it. Not like a horrifying freaked out, but just like unsettled. It was still very creepy in a way.
I have seen it. I've seen the Gus Van Sant remake.
I have not. I have no interest in
Doesn't that one
seeing
use the Bernard Herrmann score as well?
It is just the same movie.
It's shot for shot,
except
right? But
not
it's
as
in color.
except in color
Yeah.
with different actors who don't quite capture this.
I cannot
the quality.
imagine Vince Vaughn in that role, and I don't want to see it.
For some reason, I thought that it wasn't Vince Vaughn. I thought it was Jason Bateman. Like, I don't
that
know
would be
why.
more interesting.
Yeah,
I think.
Jason
Yeah.
Bateman's motel. It's Arrested Development.
Yeah, I've also seen the Psycho sequels with that Anthony.
I haven't
Perkins
seen any of
returns
those.
for.
Yeah.
They're bad.
I mean, they're not directed by Hitchcock, so I would imagine they're just money grabs. Yeah,
they're directed by Anthony Perkins. At least I think one of them is directed by Anthony Perkins, which is interesting. Whichever one is like Anthony Perkins and Jennifer Tilly, that's completely stupid. I enjoy for all the wrong reasons. So how was it to someone who had not seen it, or to sort of a modern day audience as well?
Yeah. So the lady friend had never seen it, and she, I was like, okay, like it's a horror movie, but like you should be able to survive. It's not going to give you nightmares. And She was like not scared at all and was like predicting what was going to happen throughout the movie. Spoiler alert for Psycho. She was like, oh, he's dressing up as his mother, or oh, he does taxidermy, so there's got to be something going on with that, and like she was very much putting the pieces together and like almost looking at it more as a mystery than as a horror movie. And I think there are a lot of mystery aspects to it. But it definitely, wasn't. And for somebody like, she doesn't watch horror movies. She loves Disney movies, and she still was like not affected by it really, and was just kind of picking it apart as like she was like, oh, it was okay, and she was predicting things that were going to happen successfully. But she didn't appreciate it from a filmmaking perspective the way that I did, where I was like, oh, that shot's so cool and all this stuff, and all the music's so good, and she was just like, he's his mom.
Yeah, I have wondered. I think the movie is just going to continue to stand the test of time because of the music, the cinematography. There just really are these interesting shots. The technical things that Hitchcock does are always really interesting. Like even, we talked about Vertigo and crapped on so many parts of it, but there's some really awesome technical camera work things that were done that we still talked about. But I do wonder, like looking back, you go back to these sort of prototypical movies, the ones that like created genres, and then now they're almost so vanilla in comparison, or they have these really embarrassing aspects, which I would say for Psycho, the sort of misuse of a personality disorder that has been perpetuated kind of ever since.
And the explainer scene at the end of the movie.
At the ending scene.
That is like the only bad scene in the movie. Yeah.
But probably needed for an audience back then, I wonder. But now it's like, we get it. We got it. Like, we're done. Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. Like that scene is very much like, litigated today. And like, does that make the movie worse and doesn't need to be removed? And it's like, it's whatever he shot it should stay in the movie. But like, it definitely like just slams on the brakes at the end of the movie, where you have this thing that is just amping up and up and up, and this incredible scene at the end of the movie where Anthony Perkins is captured and all this stuff, and then you just have this, okay, we're gonna sit you down, and the cop's gonna, or the psychiatrist is gonna explain to you all of the mental disorders that he's going through and all this stuff. But then you go into the prison cell and you have this fascinating scene of Anthony Perkins narrating his own thoughts, right? And that scene is really good. But like, I wish that they would have not done the explainer scene and had just been like, had some sort of protracted scene where they're like, oh my God, we got him back there. What are we going to do? And then they have the camera tracking shot into the room and have his mental thoughts going in the voice of the mother. Like that would have been a more effective ending of the film, I think.
Well, at least, they didn't George Lucas it. I
guess.
They
didn't go back and CGI
put a walkie-talkie in Anthony Perkins' hands. Whatever the fuck they do. Yeah. I some of the Hitchcock stuff has not aged as well, I would say, like for modern audiences, but it's just a thing of the times, right? Like you become desensitized to some of the older shock value things and some of the stuff that you didn't understand before. It's like now we're way more educated on that, and it becomes like way more antiquated. So I think that it's important to keep it there as a cultural touchstone, to know, like, back then it was thought of as being like something that was so shocking and different and misunderstood and this, and now we can see it and we can critique it and we can comment on it. And that doesn't make it worse necessarily. That just means, hey, we preserve it this way. That's the history.
Yeah, and the thing that stands the test of time with Hitchcock movies is just his filmmaking prowess is still so impressive today, right? And like, I watched a featurette on the Blu-ray of like a bunch of directors just talking about the influence of Psycho and Hitchcock more broadly, and like Scorsese was just gushing about Hitchcock and like talked about how much that influenced Cape Fear, like not just Psycho but Hitchcock's filmography broadly. William Friedkin said that basically like no one needs to go to film school anymore. You should just watch all of Hitchcock's movies and like learn how to make movies, like how to adapt all of these techniques in cinematography and scoring and like framing shots and all these things. And like, I would argue that Hitchcock knows less about developing characters than maybe any director that has ever like been a successful Hollywood director. But he's so good at everything else that like it's okay, right?
Matter,
It's like, I wish that Vertigo had better character development, but it doesn't. But it's still a good movie, right? And it does a lot of cool things that are really interesting. So like his films stand the test of time because they're just really well made, and he has such an incredible cinematic eye where he can craft these movies in a fascinating way. And Psycho is up there with the best of the movies that he's made, obviously. And it's just if you watch it, if you have any sort of context for movies, you understand, oh yeah, this is like really well crafted, the way it's done.
Yeah. If it wasn't for Hitchcock, we might not have had Top Dog with Chuck Norris and that shaggy dog. Hey, it's John from the editing booth. And if you listened to the last episode of Recommend or Refute, you know that I am still in the wrong on this one. It was not, in fact, Hitchcock that used the tower from Top Dog. It was Orson Welles. Anyways, back to what we were talking about. And that whole sequence at Balboa Park.
Where they shot the
where they
Vertigo
reopened
sequence.
the Vertigo tower for him.
There's a lot of things we may not have had without Hitchcock. Scorsese, Friedkin, Top Dog.
So many cultural touchstones.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Cool. Ryan, as the resident Hitchcock expert, any other comments on Psycho?
Yeah, I think I'd said it before that I'm like, I think Psycho just is his best. It's kind of clear just because of the cultural impact that it still has.
Mm-hmm.
We just directly the slasher films, the giallo, right, are just like directly came right off of like, oh, I want to do that too. And yeah, I do think that the other thing about Hitchcock is this: it's right around the time that you start to have like the director is so much this personality, and then you're going to these films because of the director.
It
He
was
just
Alfred
such a larger than
Hitchcock's
life.
Psycho in the credits, right? Like, yeah, his name is a big part of it.
And he knew how to like promote himself and promote his movies. Like the other thing about Psycho at the time was just how much he like hyped it up and created, like it was like social media marketing today, where he just like made up all this bullshit about it and what people were experiencing and things like that to get people to come in.
Well, and he had his
it.
TV show at the time too, right?
Yeah.
So he could promote it that way, and yeah.
Yeah.
I still think Notorious is his best movie, but I also have a huge crush on Ingrid Bergman, so there's that.
There you go.
Cool. Okay. All right. So we have 3 recommends this week, correct? John, you're recommending
Rage of Vengeance.
Yeah. Again, I already forgot.
You already forgot it.
Rage of Vengeance. It's on Tubi for free, folks.
Yeah, folks. You don't have to pay a dime to suffer.
That is the only way you can watch it, I assume.
Yep.
Ryan is recommending Trick or Treat, and I am giving a big 2 thumbs up for Psycho. So that wraps us up for this week. Thanks for joining us, everybody. With me, as always,
John Garcia, folks. Let me know what you think of Rage of Vengeance if you watch it. You're one of 5-6 people if you end up watching it.
John
will
be monitoring the Letterboxd page every day, just
I'm refreshing
hoping
it right
for
now.
someone else to rate that movie.
Doing a pull down and refresh right now.
And
Brian King. In defense of Tubi, Mandy is on Tubi.
Oh, really?
There you go.
It's not all terrible
Watch
stuff.
Mandy for free.
Oh, I did not know that. Well, you should definitely watch Mandy. I always forget to introduce myself at the end of these things. I have been your host, Michael Dixon. Yep.
Hey there, movie buffs, TV toughs, and all listeners in between.
John here from the Afterthoughts podcast. I just wanted to drop in at the end of this episode and say thanks for listening. If you've got afterthoughts of your own to share, hit us up. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Afterpod, or jump into a conversation on our Discord server. You can find info for this and more at theafterpod.transistor.fm. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.